everyone. Today is Thursday, September 16th, 2021. The time is 6:30 p.m. The meeting of the City of Greensburg Redevelopment Commission is called to order. At this time, please silence all electronic devices. If everyone would stand, we'll begin our meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
To comply with Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, the city requests that participants in this meeting complete a voluntary anonymous survey that is available on the table in the back of the room. Judy, would you conduct roll call, please?
Ken Dornan.
Present.
Jamie Humphrey.
Here.
Carol Coleman. Here. Darren Burkhart.
Here.
David Weiger.
Present.
Mark Bauer.
Here.
Next item on our agenda, approval of minutes of our last meeting on August 19th. Hopefully everyone's had a chance to review them. Are there any corrections to the minutes? Hearing no corrections, they stand approved as presented. First item under old business, Mr. Philip Roth from American Structurepoint is here to give us an update on the Indiana Department of Health preparation of community-wide bicycle and pedestrian master plan. Mr. Roth, please.
I didn't know if you wanted to introduce, say any introductory remarks, or?
Yeah, just
Okay, all right, I'll wing it. First of all, is everybody comfortable if I have my mask off? It's definitely easier to public speaking. Also, it occurred to me that since the presentation screen is going to be behind you, that you might prefer to have a hard copy. This is against my normal practice. Because you'll be looking at this rather than looking at.
Do you have another one?
I believe so. Okay. If not, I've got another one. That's about it.
Just the attorney.
Just the attorney.
He doesn't want any more paper.
So, anyway. Well, thanks for having me. We've been working for the past several months on the bicycle pedestrian system plan. The Redevelopment Commission is the pass-through for the grant that is funding or partially funding the plan through the State Department of Health. And we thought it would be a nice idea to have a briefing and get your input on the process and how it's been going prior to wrapping it up, and we are getting close to the conclusion of the process. Now, the State Department of Health, the grant stipulates that funds have to be spent by the end of this month. So we are under a time crunch, and that has meant that we've kind of compressed certain parts of the process in order to get everything done. We are going to get everything done, and since we're doing the comprehensive plan as well, we're going to be hanging around and we can make any necessary adjustments as we go forward. We have been working with the study review committee that has met several times and will meet once more to discuss the input. And my objective tonight is just simply to give you a briefing of the process and a very high level overview of what we've been talking about and what kinds of recommendations are being or coming out of the plan. I can go into as much detail as you like, but for the moment, I thought I'd keep things at a deliberately high level, and as the conversation evolves, we can go into various elements. We did have a public meeting on August 16th at the YMCA. It was not very well attended, to be perfectly frank, but we also had a survey that was open for 3 weeks. We had 112 responses, which is about average for a survey of this type. We had I was very pleased by the age breakdown of the responses, in the sense that we had a fair number, or a good number of people falling into the young adult demographic. It's been repeated to us by several officials, including members of this body, I believe, that one of the objectives of the plan of the city is to see how it can make itself more attractive to younger adults. And so having those kinds of responses was helpful. However, most of the respondents have been in the city or been residents of the city for quite some time. About a little under 90% have been here for longer than 10 years. So not many new residents. So that's kind of something to take in mind as we go through the results of the survey. I'll just simply talk about some of the main findings of our survey. It seems that the types of trips that people are making on bikes or by foot tend to be primarily recreational or fitness trips, closely followed by shopping. People also mentioned getting to the park system. That's kind of inherent to recreational access, but that was a specific mention in the survey. There does seem to be a group of people that depends upon the bicycle and pedestrian system for everyday transportation. It's not huge, but it's not small or something to ignore either. About 15% of the respondents said that they depend upon biking or walking for shopping. A smaller number seem to be reliant on biking or walking for employment. Most people talked about dedicated facilities as a way to be able to improve the accessibility of the system and to make it more desirable to bike and walk around the city. However, people also said that quiet streets, that is streets that like East Street that don't seem to have a whole lot of traffic on them, those seem to be quite nice for biking or walking as well, as long as the traffic levels are low. I was intrigued by the high number of responses. About 40% of respondents left a comment. We have this open-ended question at the end of the survey, like we do in every survey. Tell us anything else that's on your mind. And it's unusual to have so many people fill that section out because you get to the end of the survey, you kind of have this survey exhaustion set in. You don't want to answer any more questions, just close out the survey, goodbye. But 40% of the respondents did mention or did put general comments down, and of those people, about 1/4 of them mentioned City Park or Park Road by name as a needed connection for the bicycle pedestrian system. And this is consistent with comments we've been hearing from stakeholders. It's consistent with comments that we received when we were developing the capital improvement plan and program last year. So that general comment has been reinforced by the public. And then another thing is that people seem to think that about 15 minutes is about a good cutoff for a biking and walking trip for transportation. That does bring me to a point that I forgot to mention at the beginning. One of the stipulations of the grant, it's through the State Department of Health, but it's actually being funded by federal transportation dollars. So the plan has to have a transportation focus. That doesn't mean that we can preclude recreational purposes. It just means that when we view the bicycle and pedestrian system from a high level, we want to make sure that it is addressing transportation objectives within the community. So, sorry I omitted that. In our discussions and interpretations of public input and stakeholder input, and translating everything out into a series of actionable items for the city to implement, we're looking primarily at 3 main categories. The first, and probably the one that comes to most everyone's mind immediately when we talk about a bicycle plan, are the infrastructure recommendations. What are we talking about is what the system is going to be, and what does that entail as far as costs that the city would have to incur. Also looking at potential funding sources. I'll mention a couple of things as we go through the presentation. Another component that you typically see in plans of this type is promotion of different types of educational awareness for both bicyclists and drivers. I was struck that we asked the question specifically in the survey how familiar respondents were with bicycle laws in Indiana, and several responded that they didn't even know there were any. So, and then of course a number of people pointed to drivers, not as many as I would have thought. Comments about speed didn't show up, comments about sharing the road. There may have been one or two, but overall, there doesn't seem to be a widespread perception of a problem with sharing the road, motorists sharing the road with bicyclists. And that was a pleasant surprise to me. We might also consider having some driver education programs or driver awareness programs, but overall, it seems that that's not perceived to be a problem here. And of course, I'd be interested in your opinion on the topic. And the last component is actual promotion of the system. You know, we would want to have eventually, or the city would want to have eventually, a map of what the routes are going to be so that it's educating people as to what's safe, what's desirable, how long certain routes take to get to certain places, what's connected to them. That type of a map or that type of a promotional effort denotes or implies some kind of a branding effort. What are we going to call the system? What's its logo going to be? How's it going to be related to the city's existing communication efforts? And then what kind of signage are we going to do? Some communities have different type of events to promote bicycling, including bicycle rodeos. It's often done by scouts. That's all for educational purposes. And then fire departments in many communities are often involved with kind of fix-it fairs, events to repair bicycles and bring them up to some kind of operational level. Now, in looking at where we wanted the system to go, we took the goals, we took the public input, and developed some performance measures, including how well we were accessing residences, how well we were accessing shopping areas, how well we were accessing parks, and we added in the YMCA and the library into that. And we specifically denoted the city park. You know, there seems to be some kind of interesting naming conflict. Some people call it the city park, some people call it the county park, some people call it something else. But the access to city park, we called out as a specific objective that we wanted to know whether alternatives met. There's also a low-income area, an area that the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development has, on the basis of census geographies, has said is predominantly low to moderate income. That's the area in red that you see on the map. The significance of that is that this area is eligible for public facilities expenditures from HUD funding. And that funding in Indiana is administered by the Office of Community and Rural Affairs. So for facilities that we might want to implement within that red area, there are dedicated funding sources that are available. The low to moderate income area also points to some of the equity components of the system. This area, although we don't have firm measures, is more likely to have a higher reliance upon bicycles and walking for transportation. And we kind of mapped the existing facilities on this map to show you where they stand in relation to everything else. Now, I mentioned that we've kind of compressed the process. We went through a thought exercise to say, what would a system based on, that focused on a certain principle look like? In the upper left, you see a map that's focused on downtown connections. On the upper right, you see a system that's really trying to access that low income area and distribute the trips to shopping and to employment. The lower left is something that is circling the community and accesses the areas that are that might be growing in the future. And then the map on the lower right is showing a system that would connect all of, or most of the parks and the institutions like the YMCA and the library. Now these are very conceptual. We did for each of these kind of map them out, taking a look at what kind of assets might be existing, and seeing how on the ground this might apply. This is one concept we looked at for this periphery type of system. And we started to notice something. We noticed that a lot of the projects that you currently have in your capital improvement plan and program, the ones that are shown in the blue bubbles here, map up or line up well with this notion of a circumferential or peripheral system, a wheel circling the community. On the bottom you have Park Road. There is a plan to upgrade the Park Road, or at least one that's denoted in the capital improvement plan and program. And a multi-use path has been scoped as part of that upgrade. As you move to the east, there was a trail that connects River Road to Sand Creek, skirting the two cemeteries as well as the wastewater treatment plant, north side of the wastewater treatment plant, before heading up north into Rebecca Park. This is also on the capital improvement plan and program. If you add those projects to some things that you already have in place, including Veterans Way and the trail system that you have accessing the high school on the east side, you have this nice loop. This laser pointer doesn't work. Oh. You have a nice loop, at the beginning of a nice loop that encircles the community. That's not Vermillion, is it? Vandalia, thank you. This is also a project that's on the capital improvement plan program. It also has multi-use path incorporated. We went through a couple of refinements. We started to notice that there were some areas that were kept cropping up as potential problems. Three of them involve crossing State Road 3. The first is at Main Street. And we think that this can be solved with a design option, probably having some pedestrian shelters or pedestrian buffers. We would have to talk to NDOT about that, of course, since they control the roadway. But that seems to be a suitable place where crossing could be made. Another more controversial one is at 421. We would argue that this one is necessary because you already have people crossing that at that location in somewhat substantial numbers right now. So that also allows for a connection into the YMCA trail, as well as potentially making up for some sidewalk gaps that lie along the roadway. The largest area of concern has to do with the crossing from Veterans Way and Lincoln on the north end. One option was to connect the trail west, but then how do we bridge the gap between Veterans Way and the new facility? Another possibility is to come across Montgomery to Lincoln and then connect into the existing sidewalk system. Montgomery, the trail along Montgomery comes a little bit west of the current, I say trail, the multi-use path, comes west of the trail there. And then the connection from Sand Creek up into the trail on the east end through Rebecca Park. So these are some of the problem areas that we see. Some of them will require a little bit more in-depth treatment. But we took a look at how well each of these was performing relative to those measures that we were looking at before. And this alternative, this refined alternative that we're looking at, seems to outperform everything else or be at the top of all of the measures in terms of residential access, in terms of accessing shopping areas, in terms of accessing the low to moderate income area, in terms of accessing the parks. So we did some final refinements to that, and that's the one that we are currently showing for discussion. On this alternative, we have the capital improvement projects along the south end, as well as Vandalia. We have some kind of a conceptual route as yet to be named later on the west side. Again, it's a little premature to know what the route and type of facility that's going to be until we know what kind of development the comprehensive plan is going to propose for that area. Is it going to be industrial? Is it going to be residential? Is it going to be nothing at all?
Where's that at?
What's that?
Which one are you talking about?
I'm talking about the dotted line on the west side. And then in this particular alternative, we are proposing that we come west along Montgomery to Lincoln. And then there's going to be, we're proposing that there be some kind of a split between either Lincoln and East or Lincoln and Broadway for some kind of having the pedestrian movements down Lincoln, which has a nice sidewalk, and then having the bike movements come down East Street, which, although narrow, is nice and quiet, or it can come down Broadway, which is wide and has room for potential striping of bike lanes. So this is where things currently stand. As far as wrapping up the process, I told you I talked about this. Looking at what the characteristics would be, this alternative adds a little under 10 miles to what's already existing in the plan. By existing, I mean, of course, what's on the ground, and by plan, I mean what's in the capital improvement plan program. The additional expenditures over and above the capital improvement plan program are about $1.5 million. The capital improvement plan is programmed or has anticipated about project costs about $7.2 million for Park Road and Vandalia and the trail to Sand Creek. What's that? Now I know that there's currently some grant writing going on for Park Road right now. So we don't know what that funding source is. You may notice that there are no entries in the row labeled unknown. Going back to what this final alternative looks like, it's our hope for this west side, this dashed line here, that we can arrange for developments to incorporate the facility into their subdivision plan. That is, it's a typical process as development comes, in this case, the county, but as development ensues and the city presumably annexes the area, the city's zoning code, subdivision code, future unified development ordinance, that facilities can be required of developers as part of that ordinance. So it's our hope to be able to, or our intent to be able to include pertinent regulations that would allow the city to work with developers to include those types of facilities as they develop their subdivisions. So right now we're on pace to wrap up all the technical content by the end of September. In order to meet the requirements of the State Department of Health grant, the plan has to be adopted into the city's comprehensive plan. We're still seeking some guidance from the state on when exactly that needs to happen. Since we're already doing an update to the comprehensive plan, can we fold this into that adoption? Do we need to do an interim adoption, amendments to the comprehensive plan now, and then just take it into consideration when we update or adopt the final comprehensive plan later on? So there's still some questions that are pending. But that is at least the general direction in which we're headed. Now, Ron, sir, I didn't know if you had anything to add to the process. There are some corrections to the presentation. This is a modification of a presentation we made to the study review committee. So we know that any references to abandoned rail right-of-way are to be corrected, and we intend to do that in the document. So was there anything else that you thought merits a discussion?
The only thing that I might add is the State Department of Health is requiring that you invoice us everything before the end of the month.
But the invoice has to be submitted. Okay.
Yes, because they are prorating the grant, not the first 10,000 or 50% of the first 20,000.
We will work with you to get that done.
So that has to happen to satisfy the grant requirements. Other than that, the process, whether we amend the current comp plan or if we can fold it into the new one, seems to be a procedural matter. My understanding, Philip, is that you're packaging this in such a way it could be functionally a chapter inserted into the new plan.
That's
So
correct.
even if we, the planning commission and the council amend the existing plan, we would then take that chapter and insert it to the new one.
Yes. It's common for comprehensive plans to have a dedicated chapter called a thoroughfare plan, something that outlines the high level what the transportation recommendations are arising from whatever we're proposing for the future form of the city. And that would be an appropriate place to include the recommendations if whatever that is.
So a couple of questions. What kind of lighting or emergency features will these trails have?
It depends upon, the
Location, I'm
the
sure.
location.
Yeah.
I'll have to go back and look to see if the capital improvement plan program projects included any kind of electric features or cross-section, in their cross-section. That's a good question. Because Sand Creek was already on the capital improvement plan program, we didn't delineate that in as much detail. Other roads like Park Road, the multi-use pathways will have the same overhead lighting that's typical for that kind of.
Yeah, I guess, when you get out west here, that's cornfields, there's nothing there.
Right.
So that wouldn't be able to be used in the evenings. And I know some of the existing trails, there's no lighting. I think those are dusk till dawn type of trails. So from a transportation standpoint, I didn't know what the requirements were.
No, there's no special requirement that has to be open during evening hours.
Okay.
And in fact, for example, the Indianapolis Greenway system is dusk to dawn.
Okay.
It doesn't have special provisions. In fact, if you get caught after hours, you're going to pay a pretty stiff fine. thoughts? I mean, how well do you think this system meets transportation needs of the community?
The concept and the idea is great. It sure covers a lot of the city and makes many areas accessible.
You know, one of the things that, you know, on our staff, we have a couple urban designers. And during processing of this tape, we often come together over like Jimmy John's and just, you know, discuss the concepts we're coming up with. And one of our urban designers noted that where we're crossing State Road 3 at the north and south, these are locations that in the past have been identified for gateway treatments. That is for specific urban design treatments, saying, you're in Greensburg, now you already have something at the top of Lincoln Street, State Road 3 right now. But the point of this urban designer, the point he was making was, you know, if you're making some kind of symbolic statement about your community with a gateway treatment, some kind of welcome to Greensburg sign or monument or whatever, and you have some kind of a alternative transportation facility that is intersecting where you want that gateway to happen, that is an interesting and positive statement to make for the younger demographic that you're trying to reach. So that's not necessarily going to be a recommendation of the bike plan. That's well outside of its scope. But it's interesting to see the system aligning with larger objectives. Another thing that we like about this system is you start to see circuits of varying lengths emerging, so that if you are a recreational user, you have a lot of different options in terms of where to go, variety, different lengths of where you can bike. It's not like, you know, trail right now, you bike to one end and you have to bike all the way back to the other, or have somebody pick you up like I did. But you have a circuit that allows you to keep the variety of the ride and make it a more pleasant recreational experience. So.
So down there, southeast side, on 421 going out, there's a lot of residential down there. 421 is not an easy road to access. We have a lot of walkers down there, but they can't cross 421 very safely.
Okay.
I know you got that connection down Sand Creek, but I still don't know that you connect to a lot of the neighborhoods in that area.
So kind of thinking about how to tie in the crossing that would be part of the Sand Creek
How they
facility,
get to that.
getting some kind of access to the local neighborhoods to allow them the ability to cross. Okay.
Take into account when 421 was developed with Honda, there was a path earmarked that ran along Old 421 in front of Honda.
Okay.
They actually put in the drainage structures even so that they leveled it so that you would just have to pave it. That was the intent when they were designing that.
Okay.
It was supposed to connect to the sidewalks along 421 inside where they.
So just off the map here.
Yeah, basically, I think it may be shown there as it goes on where we got to the end of the road. There's actually, Honda allocated a certain amount of space for this path.
Ah, okay. The challenge with accessing Honda, to be frank, is that it's so far out of the way. You know, most of the facilities that you see on here, a single facility accesses more than one thing. Even Park Road accesses the county fairgrounds, it accesses residential neighborhoods. You know, if you're going to Honda, that's pretty much, well, there are other employers out there as well, but hopefully we can more in the future. But you're talking about adding about 2 to 2.5 miles of additional facility and constructing additional facility. I did not know that the right-of-way had already been set aside.
It
That
really
does-
just be paving, basically.
so I will look at that a little bit more. But it's still, you know, from a public benefit perspective, it can still be somewhat to justify going that far flung out. Several people came to the public meeting who said they occasionally do commute their bike to Honda, and said that it would be nice to be able to do that more. It was not a majority of people who were part of the public outreach, but it's certainly interesting. One wonders how a car company would view a bicycle pedestrian accident. But they set it aside, so they must have some kind of.
So it's outside, it's basically they have a 150-foot strip around their entire perimeter for utilities.
Okay.
Yeah, the biggest, I think that's what we've been fighting since they put the bypass to State Road 3 by 6, the community had get access on both sides of the bypasses.
Okay.
So I think we pointed that out earlier. So.
That is a compelling rationale.
Not only did it, like, they cut off all the drainage too, so we're still fighting the drainage.
Thanks, Jim. Any other comments or questions?
I think it's a great idea.
Well, I've been gone on for much longer than I thought I would, my apologies, but I appreciate your time. And please, if you have any questions, my contact information along with the information of several of the other staff members who worked on this project is available, and I'm at your disposal.
Already. Thank you.
Thanks.
Mr. May, would you care to give us a couple updates, please?
Good evening. Good evening. We had a little bit of good news today with regards to Veterans Way. Apparently, Duke has finally formulated a schedule for doing the work necessary to get their facilities out of the way, and that is scheduled to occur next week. Frontier has been on site, at least to investigate, but hadn't done anything, and they've kind of disappeared a little bit again. The utility conflict predominantly affects driveways to First Financial. So the mainline road is continuing forward. They are, aside from the surface proper, most of the paving work is now complete. They're continuing to build the remaining curb and gutter. They're working on the modifications in the intersection of State Road 3 and Veterans Way. They are working on the traffic signal modifications. All of these things seem to be coming together pretty well. The current guesstimate of when the work will be finished is the end of the first week in October. That is simply a guesstimate. Until the utility situation is 100% resolved, and also this time of year tends to be generally good construction weather, but if we get rain, it's going to impact the schedule. So they're laying sod, that work is moving forward. They've installed the benches that are on the project, and a lot of this is coming together pretty rapidly.
There's 2 drives for First Financial.
Yes, they're ATM.
And then, but they still have the access off of State Road 3?
Yes, yes. They have, I don't even know how to describe it, a shared driveway with their neighbors. I mean, they have access on both sides of their property as well as the one on the 3.
Oh, okay, so you can cut through.
Yeah, you can't cut through the neighbors. I don't know if that's a formal arrangement.
But I guess the point being is since the driveway's taking extended period of time, we're not cutting off access to First Commercial.
Correct. Correct. And Mark has some information to share with you on the financial parts of this project, so I'll let him at the podium.
Good evening. Ron gave you the status of the work. Right now, we're at 84.7% complete. So we got about 15%, so if they can get 5% a week, we ought to finish in the schedule, the time frame they've given us. I've done some checking. We've had 3 change orders to date. The first one came in rather early. It was in regards to utilities, if you'll remember, and some water lines and sort of valve that had to be done. It was about $13,000. The second one was our subgrade treatment. We had hoped to use lime stabilization, and it came back from the geotech that we ended up having to use cement stabilization at a 4% concentration. That was also about $13,000. And the last one was, NDOT got involved with traffic at Seymour and proposed some changes as far as the signals. They wanted some flashers on State Road 3 for advanced warning for our pedestrian crossing.
Okay.
Specifically, the right, if you're northbound 3 onto southbound Lincoln, you've got that lane there where you can come off and turn. They really wanted some advanced warning there because they got to slow those people down because there's pedestrian crossing right there in that turn.
Is it blind? Is it a little?
No, it's not blind, but you've been through there. I mean, those people
They come
fly
flying
when they
through
come
there.
off State Road 3. And they know there's no stop for them whatsoever, so they're trying to get people to at least be semi-alert to the possibility of pedestrian crossings. And that change order was about $21,000. But all 3 of them together is less than 1.5% of the entire project cost, so we're doing pretty good. The other thing I gave you was a spreadsheet. This is for the construction inspection services. You can see as of the end of July, American Structurepoint has billed us for $378,000. The maximum contract amount is up in the upper right-hand corner of $484, so there's about $106,000. We have stressed to them the last couple of months that we expect that number to hold and for them to get us through the final construction record without an additional increase.
484?
Pardon?
Of the 484?
Yes. I got 106 and they're hitting for 40 grand a month. I've already incurred August. I've got September. Yeah, do the math, 26,000 to get to the end and get the final construction record. But right now, we've made our point clear where we expect them to be. Because of myself, Ron, and a couple other people, I think they've been somewhat overstaffed throughout part of the project. And that's not our fault, that's their fault.
Can they get started on some of that now?
Pardon?
Some of the records?
The way
And with the new software that NDOT's just rolled out, it's all done online, so more of it is submitted on a daily basis. In other words, where we used to end up at the end and you create the whole damn final construction record. In other words, all of our certifications are done, all of our dailies are already there.
So it shouldn't be as big an effort.
Exactly, it shouldn't be near as involved to close it out. But I just want you to know that we're working to try to keep the project in line on cost. As you can see, the NDOT's kind of slowed down on reimbursements. We're entitled to 302, and right now we've received 185, so hopefully we'll get the $125,000 back in the kid as quick as possible. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark.
Is there an update for the HOTIF, the residential project?
In your meeting last month, you authorized the mayor to execute an agreement with an appraiser for up to $7,000. In fact, the mayor did that. I think the fee came in at $62.50. That is to appraise the 5 individual parcels that you have up there. It is hoped and expected by the end of this month, those appraisals will be available. Chris had indicated previously that a part of the process of transferring title will require an appraisal for the residential portion itself. We have not had any further discussions with the proposed developer yet. We're really trying to get an understanding of, well, first, how the process works, and secondly, reach an agreement of principle with them. But with the work that Chris is doing, I think that's an integral part of that understanding. I know you've been working on it, Chris. Anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, and I think I can give a pretty good update. So the biggest hurdle that's being faced is, and I'll be honest, I think we're running into this kind of the same way when we started doing the residential TIF, and we said there's not a lot of places in the state that have done this. This is also what we're running into there, is that we're taking something that is currently a single parcel, and if we do it right, we're dividing it into 88 different sub-parcels. Well, that is going to take a multi-phase approach, and we don't want to give away our security or property. You know, we want to do it in a phased-in manner so that we maintain security interest in the property. So that if something were to happen and that project were to not be able to proceed, we still have our property. Does that make sense to everyone? I mean, that's essentially, you don't want to give up your dirt. So that's really the biggest hurdle we've been dealing with. Statutorily, I have identified all of the various statutes and things that we have to follow in order to do this. We have a timeline. The first step in all of those timelines is the appraisal. So I think that is proceeding forward. I know one thing we had discussed, or this board had discussed, is an idea of wanting to be able to move on this, be done with this so that we can start in the next calendar year, and I think that is still a very doable timetable. I hope to be able to come to you at your October meeting, and I will say this one's a little weird because it feels like your meeting came really early in the month when it normally doesn't come quite this early. But I do hope to be able to come to you in your October meeting with this, with the proposals on sale and a project agreement that we can sign with the appropriate builder based on the prior specifications. The mayor and I have been in discussions with them, and I have reached out to their council because now it's just a matter of, okay, I've identified the 6 potential ways to skin the cat that I want to be able to give them, and figure out which one of those 6 is going to make them okay with the project. So we've narrowed our focus down to this is what I think we have to do statutorily, and I want to negotiate that remaining portion of developing the project agreement for submission to you for your approval with their input, so that we know that when you guys approve it, that all of the parties are essentially in an overall understanding of how we're moving forward. So that's where we're at. I had hoped to have an agreement to you to review this period, but once I've started drafting it, I've got my skeleton, and I just realized that as I was working through it, I really need to hammer down how we're going to handle the security interest and what the partners will be willing to accept. How will they be okay with this, and how do we maintain our phased-in components? So that's where I'm at, and I'm happy to answer any questions that anyone may have with regard to it.
I believe we're one of 3?
2 or 3.
2 or 3 in the state of Indiana, so we're on the leading edge of this.
Yeah.
There's a lot that's unknown because nobody's done it yet. And that gives us the opportunity to flesh out some of the statutes, because that's kind of how that process works in my experience, is the first guy kind of outlines things.
I will say, some things I think we are, as my law professor would say, proceeding unfettered by law, because I don't really know that they've written it in such a way to contemplate what exactly we're doing. But I will say, I've spoken to many different municipal attorneys and representatives on similar things that they've done, and we're kind of taking an amalgamation of those different types and then making it fit within the TIF statutes as they were.
As interpreted, statute as interpreted.
As interpreted by me.
Yeah. And there was, you may have made mention, is Columbus working on one of these also, or is theirs a different?
Columbus is a single resident, or a single commercial
Okay.
developer, and in all honesty, the biggest thing that's causing the issue for me is the multiple parcels. Because if I had just one parcel, I would just record a mortgage against that one parcel, and then if something goes wrong, I just take my parcel back. But the minute we subdivide this, the minute that they submit a plat that says this is our subdivision plan, that one parcel that we have translates to 88. So doing 88 different mortgages and recording 88 different mortgages